Firstly, thank you so much for coming to the Oxford India Forum. We are honored to have you here. And we have here with us Professor Sunitra Gupta and Ms. Mirza. Thank you so much for being here. I would like to pass it on to Professor to be able to lead the session, please.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming in person. And it's just a real pleasure to have you here in Oxford. And yeah, let's have an enjoyable discussion.
Yes,
so,
please.
I'd like to ask you first, I mean, obviously it's your activism and your championing of particular causes that's brought you to the stage here. But first, tell us a little bit about what made you choose or how you got into acting.
I think I want to start with saying thank you. Thank you so much, Oxford, for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be here on this campus in this university. It was on my bucket list, so thank you for fulfilling a dream. I think I became an actor because it was a coping mechanism. Very young in school life, I discovered that being on stage empowered me with the ability to cope with trauma, to escape into worlds and stories and characters that were separate from my reality. And they healed me as I learned to become other people. It strengthened my spirit of empathy. But I think in many ways it's also strengthened my core character and being.
So you're using very interesting words about power and empathy, which of course now connects you to your other core. Yes, you're the core of what you do now. So would you agree that that's where this stems from now, what you're doing, or we've always been involved in? And could you also talk about early influences? What led you to activism?
I think empathy is deeply connected with the ability to be an active citizen of our world. I think it's impossible to be to lead life with intentionality without empathy. And yes, you're absolutely right. I think it is the foundation that I had in the kind of school I went to. It was a school called Vidyaranya in Hyderabad. It was based on the founding principles of J. Krishnamurti, and where I think the essence of the education system was that you cannot receive knowledge with fear. It needs to be received in an atmosphere of freedom and an absence of oppression and an absence of subjugation and restriction. And we really thrived in a very open environment where there was no gender inequality and no gender biases really in school. The girls were encouraged to do pretty much everything that the boys were doing, and we participated in all sport. We did everything together, and these might sound like strange things to many of you here right now because you've grown up in a more free and a more fair world, but we're still struggling with gender inequity and inequality. So these are home truths that still remain true. But
I just wanted to say here, one of the interesting, a thing I say that people sort of look at me peculiarly at me for is I say that I grew up in Calcutta in the 70s,
right.
And it was much more equal in terms of gender than anything I've experienced in the West.
True.
And, it's interesting to hear you echo that just as an aside. I think that obviously it's not true overall, but there are sectors in India where the gender equality is yes. far more advanced.
Yes,
anyway,
and we were privileged to be born and raised in homes
Absolutely.
that understood that, and we had progressive parents. And I think it was a combination of the education system that helped me understand this interconnectivity of all life, and it really rooted and grounded me to the various facets that kind of, form what it is that we need to sustain ourselves, to grow, to evolve. And my mother is very passionate about plants and animals. So I grew up with a parent who, was constantly rescuing injured birds and healing them and setting them free and bringing home injured animals and helping them. And my father was a bit of he was a maverick. He knew so much about the world, and he was so deeply inquisitive about everything, and he had answers and questions that I still remember, even though I lost him when I was very young. I was only 9 when he passed on. But I remember him building a solar basket and helping us heat, the water that we needed for our baths with that solar basket. And I'm talking about the 80s here. So he was innovative, he was curious. And I think it's a combination of all of that growing up that has made me a little bit of who I am. But it really was when I became a film actor. And I started working with civil society organizations. And I realized the kind of impact and reach my voice could have. And I said to myself, I've got to get past this. I have to go beyond this. I don't want to be window dressing. I don't just want to be a face to a campaign. I want to understand this more deeply and see whether I can really drive change on the ground. Can I really, really make more of an effort to form a bridge between the science and civil society? Because the scientists were doing extraordinary work in silos. A lot of their communication and language was not reaching the mainstream. And younger people, and especially people who come from more privileged societies, were unable to comprehend or understand a lot of what was being said. Unfortunately, the reality today, the climate reality today, is that the truth is hitting home, and it's deeply personal for many people in many parts of the world. But when I started out over 20 years ago, it wasn't this apparent as it has become. So I decided to be an anomaly in the Hindi film industry and campaign and work with civil society organizations that were working for environmental and wildlife protection in India. And over the years, with the work that I've done with these organizations and the work that I've had, the kind of exposure it's given to me on the ground, it's helped me build a kind of network with really incredible people who continue to inform me and educate me. And as I am informed, I share.
So, what do you think really constitutes, or how do you understand the word sustainability?
To me, sustainability is a knowing, a conscious awareness that everything that I consume in my everyday life comes from the earth, and that the earth's resources are finite, and my consumption needs to be based on that understanding, and also understanding the fact that it is our irresponsible consumption, irresponsible production, and irresponsible generation of toxic waste that is creating havoc in the natural world and in people's lives, and that the only way we should be, living, working, doing business, doing whatever we need to do, is to do it with the mindset that it needs to support all life on earth, and it can't be harmful to anything. Not the soil, not the water, not the air.
I would have to agree with you on that, but how do you reconcile that with the systems, the economic systems that currently prevail, where consumerism
which were
is
created by, I said this in a BBC interview, and I got some slack for it from certain sections of society who assumed I was I don't know, pointing to an individual when I wasn't actually. I was pointing to every man in our world who is responsible for the triple planetary crisis that we are dealing with. This crisis is not of the making of women. It's a crisis that has been led and made by men, and egocentric men who refuse to acknowledge that they've driven the crisis and refuse to change, and have created fractured, broken financial systems that are killing our planet and our people. How do we change that?
Yeah.
It's a question that I ask myself every day. I mean, there's one way of looking at it. You say either I turn into a hermit, move to a mountain, go off the grid, create my own energy, grow my own food, but that won't change the system. So how can we remain within the system and counter it, is the question that I think young people and every person who is beginning to understand why sustainability is crucial and why the SDGs are the North Star they claim to be.
In other words, it is inextricable from the political systems and the economic systems and the huge level of inequalities that they are currently generated.
But Professor, I think a lot of people now, even within the economic systems and the financial systems, are pointing to the fact that there is a huge issue with the way things have functioned so far, and things have to change. And yes, they're controlled and monopolized by those same people who are responsible for a fractured system.
All right, turn over to Kat. What do you think of do you not think there's a lot of greenwashing going on?
Yes, there is.
That allows these two actually irreconcilable elements to try and reconcile themselves? And what would you say to point, or how would you expose that? Or do you feel it's part of your responsibility?
It is a part of our responsibility to expose that. I think it's a part of our responsibility to understand that. I think there is significant power in individual action. I think some of the most defining movements for climate action have been spearheaded by individuals who've said, we need to call this out. So, and there are a lot of young people globally who are, leading these campaigns and speaking truth to power unlike ever before. So companies and industries and organizations and governments and policy are being held accountable. Otherwise, I don't remember growing up in an environment where we were encouraged to question and seek and be curious as long as it was comfortable for those in power.
Speaking of young people and youth, should we turn over to Kat?
I think as a student myself from Oxford, where we teach sustainability at the core of everything we do, what do you think should be incorporated in the Indian education system? You spoke about your unique, educational journey, and thank you for sharing that. But what do you think is something that we should, the actions that we should take from early on to be able to better tackle environmental issues, or make sustainability a part of our life? What are your recommendations?
So when I started answering your question, I started with saying that to me sustainability is mindfulness, right? It comes from a place of consciousness. And I still see so many people around me, at the airport washrooms or, any kind of washroom where people are washing their hands and the water is just running, and they're soaping their hands and the water is running, and it's just wasting and it burns my blood. I want to reach over and say, stop. Or, the mindless action of people just pulling tissue paper from the rack to dry. You need one piece, if at all, And this, you see educated people do this. So I think that mindfulness, that understanding of conscious consumerism, and that connection between your life and the living planet has to start at a very young age. It needs to start at birth. We need to raise children who understand that everything in the world is interconnected. So some of the things that I've done at home is every time my son finishes his meal, he says, "Thank you, farmer," and "Thank you, Mama Earth." And I've taken him into, farms. He's seen how food is grown. He's seeing how composting in the house is adding richness to the soil of the plants that we are growing together. He's got his plant babies. He identifies and names birds now. So what I'm basically saying is that interaction with nature and that spirit of wonder and curiosity and love that I think then propels every individual into action. Because when we love something and we care deeply about it, we will extend our own personal limits to protect it and to care for it and secure it. And I think that we can all be champions of the earth if we can foster that love and create that environment of understanding for young children. So one of the interventions that we've proposed to the Maharashtra state government, because I saw it work really well in Kenya when I was visiting there, was to help government schools set up vegetable gardens and help primary children teach them to grow trees and plant bearing trees. And this is just one of the small interventions that can go a long way.
I think I absolutely agree with you. I feel it is the baby steps that can eventually make us reach.
We don't have the time
Yeah.
for baby steps anymore. The baby steps should have started 50 years ago. But I think it's important to recognize that we are raising climate change children. We have children born into a very, very adverse world, and their future is going to be extremely challenging and hard. Your future is going to be extremely challenging and hard. And to be able to build the resilience that you need to combat with that and work towards repairing the systems that are broken, because it's possible, and nature is healing, as you know, and forgiving in many ways.
But what you're drawing attention to is a requirement for a cultural change.
Yes.
It's not just a sort of structural, economic, political change. You need, it has to be underpinned by a cultural change, which of course comes through not just the sciences but the arts. So how do you think your career as an artist connects to what you want to achieve? You've told us how they both have roots in how you grew up, but now that you have matured and developed along these two different routes, how do you see them feeding each other than, as you say, that you have now acquired a platform which you feel an obligation almost to use in a way that is meaningful?
I think the power of storytelling is tremendous. It can really bring about social, cultural, and political change. And I think, stories don't have to be entirely rooted in the crisis that we're dealing with, but there can be situations, there can be characters, there can be jobs, there can be things that the people within stories and narratives are doing or experiencing or feeling that can lead to a better understanding and possible action from the viewer as well. I'll give you a small example. I recently did a film called Dhak Dhak, which is a story about 4 women journeying on motorcycles from Delhi to Khardungla, which is, I think, the second highest motorable pass in the world. And I loved the one-line story. I was like, this is fantastic, because these are 4 women from 4 different stratas of society, 4 different age groups. So there's Ratna Pathak Shah, there's a young girl called Sanjana Sanghi, there's Fatima Sana Sheikh, and me, who I just turned 40 when I was offered this film, and I had just delivered Avyan, and 3 months or 6 months after he was born, I was compelled to get onto a motorcycle and learn to ride a bike. And I was so excited by the possibility that this film offered itself, because I got to, of course, essay a part and be a part of a subject and a story that was driving multiple SDGs. But alongside that, I said, let me use this character to drive some simple messaging. So the character Plogs, you'll see my metal bottle that has been made quite famous over the years with the hashtag traveling bottle, but it's also made its on-screen debut and finds itself in multiple movies. So I think it's that, but I also think it's equally important and relevant to, identify the stories that require even more intentionality and be able to tell them. So one of the films that we've just produced at One India Stories is a story called Panna, which has anybody from Maharashtra here? Yes? Have you all had Panna, the mango drink? Yeah, so the story is about a young boy who's losing his mango orchard to a road that is being made. And his whole life and his whole system changes. And it's a very simple story told from the child's view. But I think it's going to really make people feel something very, very strong. And I think that's the power of storytelling. I am a big admirer of Richie Mehta. I love the fact that he made a show called Poachers, and the fact that he's focused on subject matter that has never been focused on in storytelling. We've got some pretty cool action thriller dramas waiting to be told in the conservation and wildlife protection space.
We do have a long tradition in India of political cinema.
Yes.
So
and I think it needs to get widened now, the spectrum.
But it was all, when I was growing up, it was actually very separate from Bollywood.
But it's all converging now.
But yes, so it's nice to see that those threads are now coming together.
In that space, especially in the entertainment industry.
Hopefully I'll tell many of those stories as a producer.
So have you seen that shift in your career as such, in your artistic career? Has your activism impacted? You've obviously just given us some wonderful concrete examples, but do you think it's really now going to change what you decide to do as an artist?
Oh yes. I think being an actor is about being a sponge and reliving your truth infinite times. And I think the more you grow and the more exposure you get to the world and the more truth you're confronted by, the more it helps you define the spaces that you want to occupy. So I think I'm better informed now about what kind of stories I want to be a part of than I possibly ever was. And I think those are the kind of stories that seek me now. So it's all kind of interconnected.
Yes, that's wonderful to hear, because it's not, what you're presenting to us is the picture of someone who's not just decided, I have a platform, I'm going to use it to do something, but really a more organic kind of picture where what you do really connects, the two things you do connect to each other, reinforce each other, and transport you and hopefully a lot of other people to a different place where they can perhaps approach these subjects with a different level of nuance.
Yes, and I think that has so much to do with identifying your purpose and discovering what it is that truly makes you feel alive. Ethics.
Merging with aesthetics, I think, is
how wonderful, yes.
Kind of
I should use that.
Go for it. We'd love to open this discussion up to the audience, if you'd like to.
Yes. Please go
how
ahead.
do we, yes.
Is there a mic coming?
I think there's a mic.
I think there's a mic coming.
Okay.
So thank you very much for that. That was wonderful to hear.
I'd love to know your name.
Oh, sorry. My name is Mihir Sheth. I am a researcher and startup in the healthcare space here. And it was really wonderful hearing about some of the challenges you faced early on about environmental advocacy when it wasn't in vogue. Let's go with that. I want to get more involved in advocacy as a scientist, as an entrepreneur. Would you have any recommendations on how to do that, how to make my voice heard, how to tell a story that's impactful for the people making these decisions when it's not always sexy? There are a lot of healthcare conditions that aren't, for example, like respiratory conditions. How can I make myself heard to enable change in those spaces?
Wow, that's a lot of questions in one question. I will try and answer all, Mihir. I think, first off, you're a pretty strong communicator. And I think if you care deeply enough about what you want to say, and you say it authentically, people will listen to you. And you have access to every platform now that you can use your voice on. And along the way, I'm sure you'll find creative ways to do it. But there is nothing quite as incredible as collaboration. I think if you collaborate with young people who are also working in advocacy, you will find that they will learn from you and be able to tell stories quite meaningfully and powerfully. And I'm always available to further what you're trying to do. So please reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you. But I want to touch on something very, very important. There is more force being used now than ever before to silence the voice of advocates globally, and especially in countries like India. And therefore, we need more young people, and we need more people who are not as young as the young people to support those voices and stand by them. And there's some pretty phenomenal climate movements and environment movements underway in India right now, and I have the rich privilege of engaging with them regularly. They're such a force, every one of them. One of them is a teacher in Tamil Nadu, and he's also just published a book called Intertidal. Please read it. I mention Yuvan for many reasons, but one reason is because I don't quite think anyone is able to make the climate crisis as approachable, as tangible, as humane and emotional as Yuvan does. And I think that that's what really helps people. Human beings are very difficult creatures and they're very complicated. And I think it takes so much more than just, a nudge. Sometimes even a hard knock doesn't work. So I think there's just a lot of consistent, compelling storytelling that has to keep going out there to propel more action.
Right. We have a lot of questions. Yes, we really need another whole hour. But
Hello.
Okay, I will keep our answers as brief as I can so we have more people ask questions. Can we get a few more minutes extra because we started early?
I've got the microphones gone.
Go.
Hi, is this? Yeah, okay, working out, great. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. I'm Rishi Anand. I'd done a PhD here a couple of years ago, and it was very interesting to hear you say young people are now finally speaking the truth to power, but it doesn't feel necessarily as though power are listening. Yeah. And it speaks to the answer you just gave. For Professor Gupta's point, in terms of instilling a cultural change, do you think this needs to come top-down from those in power to government, or bottom-up from the rest of us to convince them the story is right? And in your experience as a communicator, what is the best way to effect change?
So, thank you for that question. From what I've understood is that the world has been so far working on a flawed system. You can't work bottom-up, not on this one. This has to come top-down. I mean, if 1% of the global population is controlling 90% or more of the world's economy, 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 it has to come top down. And it has to come from, but having said that, I think that there is a great power in individual voice and collaborative voices. And I think that we can shake the systems and compel them to shift perspectives and make better choices if we can come together and propel that action. And we're beginning to see it, like I mentioned earlier. But there's just far too much to be done in a very small window of time. We just have 7 years.
But do you not think that we should first start by dismantling this
Yes.
whole situation
Yes. And I think
where wealth is
from
concentrated
what I'm
in...
beginning to understand, oh my God, my capitalist husband is sitting in front of me. I think from what I'm beginning to understand is that there is something happening now. And I'm not going to commit to more right now, but I'm hoping that in the next 3 years, I hope we meet again, and I hope I can come here and say, it happened. It changed.
As long as it's not philanthrocapitalism.
Yes.
But anyway, let's have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Dia. I'm Shruti. I graduated from Saeed last September and very happy to be here. You spoke of storytelling. You spoke of how systems level change has to ideally be top down, and I agree. So I agree when you said that, you mentioned J. Krishnamurti's principles, how you can't imbibe knowledge, how you can't create change in fear, oppression, subjugation. I get it. And then I want to know, what do you think of leaders today employing fear or negativity in their narrative? Because I come from a country where celebrities endorse fairness claims, because, well, if you're not fair, you can't be successful. To politicians and anyone who, they were following the election coverage in the last few months, talking about how minorities are infiltrators who will take their wealth, right? We come from that country. That's the truth. So I see this as something so deeply rooted in India. And I'd like to know what Dia Mirza thinks, how it can be tackled on a systems level, from a top-down level.
Have you seen my Twitter timeline or my Instagram feed? So I'm one of those people who's like dealing with serious vitriol and hate on a daily basis. And so much of what I'm seeing is not convenient to people. So there are systems that are working very hard to discredit my voice. But I don't think there's anything quite as powerful as consistency. Just keep going. And as far as I think that's addressing the hate. And of course, what's very important is to function from a place of love. And never allow that hate to become a part of you. The second thing about the fairness creams and stuff like that, I think a lot of mindsets are changing. Actors, celebrities are better informed now than ever before. I, for one, wouldn't, even though my career started with a fairness cream. And at that age, when I was 15 and a half, I didn't even realize or think or ponder or consider what it meant to be doing what I was. I was only interested in the financial independence that the endorsement was giving me. But we live and we learn, and hopefully when we learn, we do better.
So should we have a question from
Yes.
Sure. My name's Sandeep, and I, like your husband, I'm a capitalist. But I think that capital has a lot of power.
Yes, it does.
And I also think that
So
we
long
live...
as it's not bereft of conscience.
It is, yeah, that's right. And I also think that India is a country which is highly celebrity-driven. Mm-hmm. Bollywood and cricket have such a deep impact on people's adoption of products, technology, etc. So now when you put these two together and you look at what we've done as a fund, we've actually moved away with anything that is government influenced. Mm-hmm. And so just think about this for a second. More than 45% of climate emissions in India actually happen from areas that don't have any government influence. Food tech, what people eat, beauty creams, which is with a sustainable, And so therefore, you have a very, very important place to play in all of this. Not everyone has access to Bollywood. You're part of the fraternity, whatever you want to call it, and you have access to cricketers. How many people have you reached out to in your peer group to ask them to actually push products that are climate friendly, that people use on a daily basis? Because that has a greater impact than you're trying to drive down your lack of agreement with what's happening on a policy front, for example.
I think that there's nothing more powerful than personal action. And the advantage that we have is, the access to social media and to be able to tell our stories or share important events, occasions, how we celebrate them. So, for example, all of our celebrations, whether it was our wedding or it's our children's birthdays, are waste-free, are single-use plastics-free. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll be able to see some very, very thoughtfully documented storytelling there that is being done solely to help inform more people. Now, if people in my fraternity still continue to use plastic balloons, when they hit 5 million, 50 million, 100 million followers, I can't change that. But I can use the sphere of influence that I have within my reach to make better choices, and hopefully, more people will follow as they are. The other thing is, I think there's something very, very important that we're doing right now, which is investing in sustainable companies. So it's something that I've been doing for the last 5 years, identifying companies that are absolutely sustainable and investing in them. And the trend is now growing. There are more and more actors and cricketers who are beginning to invest in social enterprises and sustainable companies. So not only are they, aligning themselves in name, but they're also putting their own money behind these enterprises. So that's some change.
Well, we used to eat
I've been trying to make the IPL single-use plastics free, but failing at it.
We used to eat on banana leaves and use unglazed earthenware, and that's how we were. So
yes, or reusable cutlery, absolutely. Absolutely, or your hands. Professor, there are so many young people in the country now at a village and a town level who are going back to basics, who are actually, so I met this team of 2 young boys at the Tide Turners Challenge this year, who've set up a company called Bartan. And they have basically invested, they've got 60,000 Indian rupees, bought 100 plates and glasses and cutlery, and have been encouraging their villagers there, the people from their village, to come and hire utensils from them when they are celebrating special occasions. Otherwise, these people had started using thermocol and styrofoam and paper plates that have like that, the thin lining of plastic. And it's incredible how when I asked a tapriwala, do you guys know what a tapriwala is? So in the Himalayas, I was doing this sojourn from the source of the Ganga to sea, and along the way, one of the things that really hit me hard was the quantum of plastic waste and the inescapable reality that there is no system that can manage that waste. So it is going to enter our water bodies, and it was burning in many places, and we're all educated enough to know what the consequences of that is. But when I asked this tapriwala, they usually used to have kullars or glass little, cups that they would serve tea in. And I said, why have you started serving tea in these plastic cups? And his answer was, it's modern. Serving tea in earthenware is not modern enough. And this is what the plastics industry did. They, have become such an inextricable part of our lives and our psyche that they have convinced communities that have lived with the land and worshipped it for centuries and understand it better than anyone ever could, that what they are doing is wrong or it's not good enough. And now the work is to take them back to themselves and say, no, what your knowledge, your faith, your belief, your systems were the most honest, and we need to go back to them.
I think returning to a 20th century concept of Indian modernity, I think would do wonders for our
now you need to start a
culture.
syllabus to teach them that.
I think they do get some of it in the art history syllabus.
Okay.
I think we might need to stop. Who's telling us?
Maybe like one last question.
One
So we
last
have
question.
7-8 hands raised.
We have 7, 8.
How many minutes
and
are
we've
you
got
giving
someone
us?
who's holding the mic, so we're going to have to defer. Okay, one last.
Hi.
Good afternoon. My name is Kabir. Thank you for your time and your thoughts. My question is around sustainability in making films. I haven't made a film myself. No one has been kind enough to cast me yet. But I would assume there's a lot of wastage and retakes and use of resources in making films. Do you, as the UNEP Goodwill Ambassador, do you have certain non-negotiables when you sign a film that XYZ must be done to make it more sustainable? Or how do you ensure sustainability in your own profession? Thank you.
Thanks, Rohan. Very important question.
Kabir.
Sorry. Please excuse me. This is a very important question, and the only way I can control the choices that we make in film production is when I'm producing myself, right? There aren't conditions like the ones I would have liked to have put in place. But yes, if I'm acting in an ad, I will make sure that the set is completely plastic free and there's zero paper waste. But the interesting thing now is that a lot of the platforms that are global, they have sustainability standards and measures that have to be implemented. It's non-negotiable, it's in their contracts. So if somebody is making a show for Netflix or Amazon, their productions have to be sustainable. There is a lot of greenwashing that happens there. But there are some good folks who are doing genuinely good work, who are managing their food waste very well and ensuring they have very limited food waste, because that's actually one of the highest components of waste that we create. And alongside that, there are many other measures that are being implemented. Single-use plastics are the easiest to mitigate and do away with. Because we were making absolutely fantastic films 50 years ago with very, very large sets and with a very, very large workforce with no use of plastic. And everybody was fed and everybody drank water and survived and thrived. So a lot of people are understanding they can go back to that now, and it's happening more frequently.
Okay, well, that was a difficult question, and thank you for answering it so graciously and generally for providing such an interesting insight into your
Thank you
life
for
and work.
talking about the intersection between purpose and action, and truly inspiring students like me and the youth, not just in India but globally. And thank you so much for just sharing all your personal stories.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.